inside, running good to the 40, breaks it to the 50, takes to the 40, takes to the 30, to the 20, to the 10, to the...
Yeah, I remember attending those in the early '80s. They were still having preview games, and you go and we even mimicked it at the little league level and mirrored that. So you get a quarter against everybody in the league, and that was the time that you kind of got to get that sneak peek at who you thought was going to be good and would be the cream of the crop for the city that year. And I think, like all coaches do, nobody wants to tip their hands, so it's very vanilla in those instances, and you kind of hold the dogs back because if you let it go too far, it can get out of hand.
Yeah.
So, Coach, as you're wrapping up your high school career, do you have aspirations or choices of different levels of college football? How do you ultimately decide to attend Mount Union?
Well, it's really a unique situation because, first of all, no one in my family had gone to school. I was the youngest, and none of my sisters or my brother went to college, and it was automatically assumed that I was going to college, and it was, I think, automatically assumed that I was going to play football on some level. I really did, to be honest with you, I didn't really think about levels or even maybe, I'm not so sure that I even understood levels entering into that market, if you will. Red used to say, recruiters are coming in, and you knew that as an underclassman, you'd see the recruiters coming in, and Red had a good rapport with all of them. But Mac guys would be coming in, and Red would say, "Hey, Ron, Elliot Juszczyk from Bowling Green's coming in tomorrow. I want you to wear 2 sweaters, and then when you meet him, I want you to stand up on your toes and grip his hand and look him in the eye and shake it hard." So he's trying to sell you, but oversell you. I mean, did I believe coming out of my senior year that I could play in the MAC? No, I kind of knew that as a 5'10", 165-pound guard inside linebacker, that I was Division III material. And, got letters from all kind of places. Got invited to a trip down in Lee Corso was at Louisville then. And didn't take the trip. Was recruited. Chester Leone was real involved with the recruiting process as a early teacher. I'm thinking he was associated with Rand, but he called me out of the blue and had a contact at Emporia State, and that's where a lot of guys were heading towards.
Yeah.
And he wanted, in the worst way, me and our quarterback, Jerry Sanchi, he wanted us to he would take us and we'd have the weekend there. But we never ended up going there. Visited Adrian, Capitol, Hiram, Mount, and I was actually, there was a number of guys that were at Hiram, and I was kind of settled into going there. and even told Melmazer, who was the coach then, that I was going to come, and then visited Mount, and me and the quarterback I mentioned, Jerry Sanchi, were going to go there together. So it was announced. We were all set up, and had a Dom Capers showed us around. He was a sophomore on the team then, and we were headed to Mount. We even on prom. We even went on after prom, took our dates, and drove up to Mount and just kind of romped around campus. Talked to a couple of the coaches, and Jerry ended up pulling out, getting an offer to Columbia. Last minute, he went to Columbia, so I was going solo to Mountain, and it was the best move that I could have made. I mean, I had a great visit down at Capitol, and Mike Dobrin showed us around, and I was kind of leaning there too, but Mount turned out to be the right decision.
Now, that's Capitol is pretty tough during that time. They won the national title one of those years during the early 70s there, don't they?
Yeah, the two stalwarts, if you will, in the conference were Baldwin Wallace and Wittenberg. But I do believe that Capitol did have a big year. But Wittenberg and Baldwin Wallace would every year, one of them were in the championship.
So for comparison's sake, as you leave that Chaney experience, which is, homegrown, hometown, son of a legendary player, you obviously come up under one of the tremendous coaches in Chaney history under Coach Angelo. That transition from high school to playing college football, is the demand different at that level for you, or is there any sense of letdown, or do you truly enjoy and feel fulfilled playing at Mount?
Well, it was night and day. First of all, I didn't give near enough justice to the influence that Red Angelo had on me, and the development. I can't speak to how good or bad I was, but I know for a fact that at Chaney I was a player because Red told me I was, and whatever he told me, I believed. I mean, he and I'm telling you, he told me one time I had him for homeroom, and he told me to I would take his attendance slip up to the office, and I came back one time and said, Coach, the secretary said they're not taking him yet. He said, hey, Ron, you go tell the secretary to whistle Dixie. I didn't blink. I turned around, and I was on my way down the hall to tell this lady, hey, Coach Angelo said, go whistle Dixie. And he come running down the hall. He said, hey, Ron. I was just kidding. No, come on back. But I tell you that because, like I said, whatever he told me, I believed. And he told me I was a player. I believed that I was. He gave me the confidence. What I'm leading to is my dad wasn't the guy that was going to sit me down and say, hey, listen, I think you should go here or there. It was like, well, this is what you're doing. You know what to do here. And in credit to him, he didn't have the benefit of playing in college, and he knew one thing, that I wasn't going to end up in the mill, although I did. Um, uh, uh, and that I was going to go to school. I mean, that's what he knew. But getting back to Red, just an unbelievable influence. And going to Mount, Ron Lynn is who recruited me. And he's an outstanding person, and is an outstanding coach. Had a great career in college and in the NFL. And going to play for Coach Wable, we actually butted heads. And my first impression during doubles is, we went for a team walk after our evening meal, and he's walking around in saddle shoes, and I'm it was night and day. I mean, during doubles I had to go to the payphone knowing that Red was in the office during their doubles, and call and just to hear his voice and say, thinking about you guys, wish the team good luck and all that. And that got me through that first year. And it was, I mean, what we went through as players was like a cakewalk in college. And we were pretty good. My freshman year, we were 8-1. And sophomore year, we were 7-2. And then things kind of took a turn. But yeah, it was, guys were bigger, I mean, but I'm pretty sure that the guys on our team, my senior year, we could play with Mount at that time. And I mean, certainly not now, but Division III football was, was the next step, just the next step above high school. I thought. And to be honest with you, that's probably an exaggeration that our team could play with that team, because we had some pretty good players that year. Mike DeBlasi was really good, and Karras and Unger and some big linemen. But certainly the practices and were nothing compared to what I was used to coming from Chaney.
Well, I'd agree, because I think when you come from that discipline approach with high school level football, and I think a lot of what you put us through in terms of paces was probably direct influence from what you went through as a player. But I was surprised that the conditioning regimen in college in comparison to what we went through in high school, because it just wasn't as intense. Now, the attention to detail and some of the extra checks and extra verbiage that you had to adapt to and adjust to on that upper level, I'd say maybe the mental side of the game is a little bit more expanded, but the physical side of the game, it just wasn't what I anticipated or expected. Like you said, that, certainly guys are bigger, they're more mature, but you quickly find out that, every team has their stalwarts and every team has their weak points. So I think you did a great job in preparing us to be able to handle being able to assimilate and contribute very early on. I think if I had played under a different coach or in a different system, I may not have been as prepared to take the field going up to that upper level. So I can relate to what you're saying in terms of leaving Chaney and going into that atmosphere of Mount Union. You know, it may not have been the same intensity.
Yeah, you're right. The cerebral part was a lot more intense at Mount, and I think the difference is they expected you to be prepared and um, telling you more or less, you come to us physically prepared, whereas at Chaney, we'll get you prepared. You know,
Yes.
physically, we'll get, you know, I'll get you there by, you know, the paces that I put you through, um, and yeah, you know, I mean, we had to come in and run what they called a miracle mile, which still don't quite get, but I mean, and you had to make a time, and if you didn't make it before breakfast every morning, you had to come and run it again until you got it. Um, uh, I kind of thought, you know, I mean, I'm thinking, is that it? A mile? You know, and coming from the workouts that we had, but and being away from home, you know, that's a factor. You're in completely different environment, and I wasn't one to throw myself into cliques or gangs or groups. So I kind of was a loner, and they housed you with a senior, and you know they didn't want to be bothered with the freshmen.
Yeah.
So I kind of just studied my playbook, and um, I remember I was reading The Godfather, just had come out. uh, but yeah.
Now, Coach, so is coaching always the goal for you? Do you know that that's what you want to do, or do you get that itch to coach later on?
Yeah, I think it was later on. Because you know I was a physical education major, and um, I'm thinking in terms of getting a job at a corporation
Mm.
that offers a fitness program or something to the employees,
Mhm.
and then uh, down the stretch, I could remember saying, "Well, you know what? You know, I started taking more education courses. It's a liberal arts school, and I thought, well, you know, maybe teaching's the way to go. And I remember calling Ed Matey and from Mount and seeing if they had any kind of opening, and they didn't. Um, and he said, but you know, we'd welcome you to come on. And I don't know, that kind of, I don't want to say soured me, but I was surprised that it wouldn't be like, no, yeah, you know, we'll make room for you. You know, I mean, um, so when I got out, I really didn't, you know, I mean, I had my application in a couple places, but as far as teaching, um, and the summer, I think what clicked me into it actually was the summer before my senior year, my junior year. I worked for Mahoney County Engineers summer job, and I worked with Ed Klein, who was the head coach at Ursuline, uh, and got to be really close to him. And he said, "Hey, listen, when you're out, you know, look me up." And he was at Camel at the time. Um, uh, when I got out, and he said, "If you know," he says, I'll bring you on board." And when the thing didn't work at Chaney, I called Eddie and he said, I could get you, I could bring you on as a freshman coach, and I could bring you on as a freshman basketball coach, me and another kid that played with me at Mount, Bobby Fredericks. And I said, great. So I started that. I was working in the mill, going to school at YSU to pick up English certification to add to my teaching certificate because I had graduated from Mount with just phys ed on my certificate. So I needed a couple courses to get English. So I picked up English while I was coaching football. So I working steady midnights, getting off of work and going to YSU in the mornings, and then in the afternoons going to football practice, and then coming home, sleeping for a couple hours, and going back into the mill.
How long were you at Camel?
Until mid-year, and then a teacher retired mid-year, and then they brought me on staff. I was at Camel for like 3/4 of a year.
Okay. I out and about, I ran into a guy who was a freshman on that Camel team. And he was telling me some stories about how you and he didn't mention the other guy's name, but he said, "Oh yeah, I know Berdis." He's like, "Yeah, he coaches in freshmen, and they put some gear on. We didn't have enough guys to practice."
That's a fact.
He'd put some gear on. And he'd be throwing us all around.
Do you remember his name?
Yeah, Struheric.
Paul Struheric.
Yes.
Sure, I remember.
Yeah. Good guy.
His father was actually the custodian at camp.
Yeah,
He's big skier. He was a big skier.
he's really athletic, like all kinds
Water
of
skier.
Yeah, recreational sports. Yeah. But just ironically, I was talking to him and that came up, and I could just imagine a young Ron Berdis year at a college all full of piss and vinegar. And
that's a fact. Ernie Hudak was the equipment manager, and I can remember going into that field house and saying, "Hey, Ernie, give me some gear." And he was like looking at me like, I said, "Just give me some gear." And yeah, we went in, we suited up, and yeah,
different times, man.
Different times.
Now, Coach, I'm sure for myself and Dallas, we followed in your footsteps in some capacity and wanting to extend that experience and be around the game and influence kids. As you think back and look back over your coaching career, from those early days through the peak times and to the point where you're going to get out. How would you sum up your development in terms of figuring out that formula that made you successful? Because I think early on when you get into that coaching game, you're very idealistic. I think there's some ego involved that makes you feel like you can be a smashing success right from the door. But coaching is an art. You have to really develop your own science in terms of what works for you and what works for the kids that you're coaching. Because I think early on as a young coach, you tend to just take the blueprint of what you've been influenced by or what you've been around, but applying it is where the real art of coaching is. Can you make what somebody else does and makes look successful work for you? Or do you get to the point where you realize, hey, I have to put my own spin on this to get it to work for the guys that are up under me?
Absolutely. That is the case. Coaches are notorious borrowers. You take a bit from everybody that you've crossed paths with. Okay. So, when I got into the coaching ranks, that was a clean slate. Okay. I mean, other than Red's influence on me and Coach Wables and the coaches I had at Mount, I'm trying to figure things out. Okay. You know, it's a whole different experience on the other side of the ball. And as things progressed, there was always the reach of, you know, maybe I want to do this on the college level, or maybe even higher. So at the end of my tenure at Camel in '74, the opportunity presented itself for a graduate assistantship at Syracuse. I wanted to get my advanced degree. I wanted to get my master's. So this was a great opportunity. I actually looked into that possibility at Kent because Ron Lynn, my position coach at Mount, had gone on to being an assistant at Kent at the time. And I went up for a game. Actually, it was when Jack Lambert played.
Mm-hmm.
And went to Ron's house afterwards and had dinner. And he was kind of urging me to do the GA thing at Kent. Well, that didn't work out. And when the Syracuse thing came out, because Red's son Jerry was an assistant on staff there, Frank Maloney was the head coach. I went up and interviewed. 40 guys interviewed for the position, and obviously I had some pull with Jerry being there. Frank hired me, and which was kind of an overreach on his part because I come from Mount Union, and most of the GAs were guys that were, you know, played at big schools, you know, played. Frank was a Michigan guy, so he was pulling guys from, you know, Michigan and schools of that nature. So I really felt fortunate, and it was just a phenomenal learning experience, and that's what it should be. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of gopher work involved there, and it really is an apprenticeship. I mean, you have to crawl before you walk. But you know, guys like Dick LeBeau were scouts then, and they're coming across, and they were scouts then, and they're coming across the desk, and you know, you sheepishly say, "Hey, could you go up on the board and go over a couple of things?" And they spend the afternoon with you. I mean, that was just an invaluable experience. So, just very very blessed to be able to have that experience, and I did that for 2 years, and you hope that somebody hits and takes you with them. But that didn't happen. You know, no one was moving much. Frank wanted me to stay another year and kind of be like a part-time, but you know, I was looking to get in something in college, and when nothing really developed, you know, I headed back into town and ended up hooking up as an assistant at Chaney, and then getting hired in the city schools with my first teaching job being at Hillman. But after the fact, a couple of years into it, Jerry Angelo had left Syracuse and became a scout. And he was with the Cowboys, and then became the director of player personnel for the Buccaneers. and wanted to fly me and my wife down and offered a scouting position, foot in the door for the NFL.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, without an interview. I mean, coming down and we'll teach you the ropes. Sitting down with my wife, saying, "Hey, this is the deal. Both of our parents were alive, um, and it's going to change our life." But what it involved, we were just recently married, and what it would have involved was 6 months out of a suitcase, and
Yeah.
that was never part of the option. Um, so I had to turn that down, and shortly after that, uh, got the Chaney job, and in going a long way around your question, um, those first 3 years at Chaney, 80, 87, 87, 88, and 89 were certainly learning years, certainly years that I thought coming in, well, I'll surround myself with a few good guys, but I'm way ahead of the curve here and I'll be able to figure this out. And if my players aren't good enough, I'll make them good enough, and we'll get this done. And then reality sets in, and you're not where you think you are. And I remember telling the staff after the second year, after going in the third, after the second year, that listen, I'm putting a 5-year timeline on this. If we can't get this thing turned around and in the right direction in 5 years, that's 3 years from now, then I'll let somebody else try this thing. No pressure or anything, but fortunately, the players each year believed more and more. I'm not trying to insinuate that those early teams didn't believe, but it was more of a maturing process on my part and being able to translate that to the staff and to the players. Excuse me. That really led to it starting to take off, and as I said, we started as a staff to start really figuring things out and adapting to the situation in '89 when we were 1-9,
Yeah.
because there were signs of vast improvement.
Yeah. Because I think when you go from being a coordinator or an assistant, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when you're in that assistant role, you have a lens that's just like this. What is my position doing? What is my side of the ball doing? And then all of a sudden you're in that head coaching role where you have to think globally for what's good for every part to this organization from start to finish. And I think when you do get that formula down and you have your foundation, your program has a philosophy, that's when you start to see the fruits of your labor. So in thinking about all of those things, from a player's perspective, if you had one more down as a player, where would you want that to be? Who would be the guys that you would surround yourself with from your playing days? Set that up for
us. As a player, there's no question it would be at Chaney, my senior year, with my absolute three best friends. We were connected at the hip. Was Jeff Romack, who went to went on to play at Purdue, Jim Raffiti, who went on to play at Princeton, and Jerry Sanchi, who went on to play at Columbia. And if it was one play, I guess it would be the replay a down in the Camel game, which we lost by one touchdown. I'd like to get it because we were just a much better football team than them, but we hadn't gotten to where we needed to be. But I'd like to have a play back then, maybe to do something to disrupt that one touchdown that was ahead of us. And obviously, as a coach, I think it would have to be the DeSales game. And there was a timeout. It was 14-14, and I went out. We were on defense. I told everybody, listen, they just didn't throw the ball. But they were obviously in a throwing situation. There was 2 minutes left in the game, and I said, just keep everything in front of you. We were in 40 solid. Make them execute, but don't let anything behind you. And one of our guys got his feet tangled up, and kid got behind him. They got down to the 17, and I'd like to have that play back and untangle my guy's foot and live to fight another day.
Yeah. Oh, Coach, it's always great getting to talk to you. I always love listening to you. What you and Dallas are doing on What's a Cowboy podcast, it's needed and it's appreciated. I guess I didn't start out life intending to be a cowboy, but I'm certainly glad that I end up being one. So, I fully believe in that premise that once you're a cowboy, you're always a cowboy.
Well, we're certainly glad that you were a cowboy. And just let me add this. It's great what you're doing, but as far as what we're doing, this is all on Dallas. I get up and jammer, every once in a while, but he's the brains and he keeps this thing moving. And I'm just happy to be part of it. And I certainly appreciate the time that you gave me. And I hope there's some people out there that can appreciate hearing an old man babble,
Well, I think, to your point, right? So I didn't say a whole lot, and that was kind of on purpose because, what we talked about when this whole thing started was, and Ron, you kind of correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, what we did here tonight is what I would want to do with my head coach who I played for is to ask all the questions that you were interested in, to hear about his life and growing up. And, when you play for a guy, you idolize a guy, but you don't know that human side of him. And that's, I think that's kind of, what this is about. It's about the stories behind the men, your dad's influence on you and how that influenced your guys and the guys you coached with. And not just Chaney guys, but these are all stories that, happened throughout the city and the state. And and that's why, Ron, I just wanted you to do your thing and ask the questions you want to know because guys don't get this opportunity. So, it's just about getting questions to some of those answers that you always were interested or start wondering when you get a little older. So,
yeah. And it absolutely matters. Years from now when, YouTube isn't a thing and technology moves beyond, you know, you getting to record and recount your history and your memories and share those moments from what was a tremendous career. Somebody learns a lesson from that. Somebody may get some confirmation in something that they're growing through in the same lane, and be able to pick and pull from what the path that you've already walked. You know, like I had stated early in our pre-conversation, you know, in 90, 91, in that early part of 92, when I'm observing you and your interactions with Mr. Berdis, you know, in the moment, you know, it's just what's in my line of sight. But as a older man with children of my own, I have tremendous reverence for my own father. And, you know, you realize that you're getting taught how to be a father just by being in proximity to a man that's coaching you. You know, there's lessons that you pass on to us as players, and you know, you're just fulfilling your role as a coach, but you are an extension as a influence and a father figure to a lot of young men who, you know, for 2 hours a day, 8 hours a day through school, because obviously coaching isn't your only role. You're a teacher, you're an educator, you're a disciplinarian, you're a guy that when Coach Berdis steps out into the hallway, whatever I may be doing at the time, my back straightens up. So, you know, just to know that you come from a guy who, for me at 15, 16, 17 years old, I'm just observing an elder statesman father talking to his son, to find out that he's probably the forerunner and the blueprint of what a Chaney Cowboy is, and to read about him and to see his prowess and that he mattered in his time during his youth. And, you know, it just lit a fire into his son becoming, you know, the guy that put Chaney on the map in terms of taking that program to that next level that Coach Chess McFee never had the opportunity to even dream about. Coach Angelo didn't get to the point to be able to experience playoffs. You have a tremendous guy like Coach Matey, who put together some great years and some great teams, and he did not get to experience playoffs. But here's the son of Steve Berdis, you know, he kicks that door open, and it still continues to this day. You know, what Coach Antrim is doing is it makes us feel good that the program is in great hands, is headed in a good direction, and young boys in Youngstown are still getting what they need, even if football may be ending in the near future for them. For that moment, for that time period, is keeping them focused, keeping them pushing towards a high school diploma, and they don't know where that's going to take them. I never thought that I'd have the opportunities that I had, but it's in direct relationship, and it's a direct result of all of those things that you taught us just through the game, and just being a person that was able to come up under your influence. So, you know, this is needed. This is history. This is a record of someone who existed, someone who made a difference, and someone who really matters and is important to the city of Youngstown, to the West Side, and to Chaney.
You know, and I'll wrap it up with this. You know, Ron has a grandson. I'm sure there's more to be had, and so his son Anthony could probably tell some of the stories that you've told him about your dad. But for you to be able to speak it, have it captured on film for that next generation, those great grandchildren to hear it, like everybody that we talk to on here has that same thing. At one point, we're all going to be old and gray, and nobody's going to care. but there are still stories that matter and were important. So, you know, I'm glad you got the opportunity to sit with your coach and pick his brain and get every question you ever wanted answered. So
Appreciate it.
yeah.
Have a Merry Christmas, Ron. Great to see you, buddy.
Yes, sir. You do the same, and you know, give my regards to Mrs. Berdis and the kids as well. I'm sure they're not kids anymore; they're grown adults, but I always see them as the young individuals that they were